Okay, well, so welcome to our little online teaching workshop. Um, I've been preparing this together with my colleague Zach Kopakin, and this is the first one of a series of 4 workshops. This first workshop is all about Canvas teaching. So we're assuming that you're somewhat familiar with Canvas already. Maybe you've just used it to upload some readings for your students and stuff. But as we're moving to fully online teaching, it seems like it's maybe nice to have a bit more insight into the more intricate functionalities of Canvas that you can use to make your online classes better. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start us out with a little session on labeling strategies in Canvas. So I'm going to start sharing my slides here with you. Um, okay, and just to remind you if you don't know this, so you'll probably have a little square with people's kind of Zoom videos in the top right corner of your screen when you're looking at my slides. You can move that around, so, or you can minimize it. So if you hover over it with your cursor, right, there's like the sort of little line. If you click on that, it'll just make it disappear so that your screen is completely unobstructed so you can see everything. And you can also, yeah, just move it around or make it bigger or whatever. So because like we're showing you a bunch of screenshots and stuff, so sometimes you might want to have that out of the way so it doesn't cover up the content that we're trying to show you. Okay, let's get started here. So Canvas is now the main learning platform that has been adopted by CU, and we think that we can make our students' lives a lot easier by all using this platform. So we're hoping that everybody who teaches at CU in the fall will use this as the main interaction platform with the students. And one nice thing about Canvas is that it allows instructors a lot of freedom to design their course pages. But of course, that means you can make it really great, but also you can make it really terrible, right? And especially for classes that are completely online, it's going to be a lot smoother if you use really clear and systematic labeling strategies for your Canvas pages. And you don't have to make it fancy, you just have to make it really easy to navigate. And to start, I want to look at some examples of Canvas designs that are maybe not so great. So I was Googling around for this, and so this came up as a design for a Canvas page that people thought perhaps was not so great. So maybe if you can identify something here that's perhaps not so successful, maybe just unmute yourself and maybe say what you think is not so great about this design. Anyone?
Balloons is misspelled. That's unforgivable.
Okay, well, that's true. Maybe you should, you know, spell check, but I think there are worse things happening here. So what else do you think is perhaps not so well designed here?
So is that sort of frame within a frame within a frame, is that an automatic feature of Canvas, or is there, yeah.
No, it's not, right? It's kind of like, it's like divided up into smaller segments for no apparent reason. That's right. Anything else?
Yeah, the student kind of action items like the complete assignment is just sort of jumbled in there with a whole bunch of other things. So
right, it's not organized according to any sort of clear principle, right? And also like these little icons, why does this week have a B? And why does next week have a P? I have no idea, right? So it's like kind of cutesy, but it's just more confusing than anything else, right? So yeah, not great. Let's look at another one. Here's another one. This is, I think, supposed to be for a German class, and you might not know what all of these words mean here, but I think you can still look at it and maybe get an idea of why this is not optimal design. So what do you think is kind of not so wonderful here? You can just unmute yourself and talk if you have an idea.
I mean, so one thing that's not ideal is all that blank space on the left, but that's not exactly it's not going to confuse anyone.
That's true. That's true, right? So yeah, the blank space is maybe not great. So one thing that, so maybe this is not super obvious, but really what this person seems to be doing is they seem to be just like adding content sort of in this like infinity scroll, right? So there's just like one page and it has basically homework for March 12th, then homework 15th of January. So imagine you have that for the whole semester, right? Where somebody just always adds the new content sort of at the bottom, and you have to like scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll to get to the parts that are supposed to be for that part of the semester, right? Also not great, and it becomes really hard to find anything. So you don't want to do that. And apparently this is very common. I was like, well, who would do that? But then when I've talked to people who teach this stuff, they're like, no, there are lots of people who just put everything in one page and just keep adding. And so I'm like, okay, I need to show people that they shouldn't do that.
And Julia,
yeah.
So also there's no text, like there's nothing that's explanatory. It's just like you said, adding content without nothing personalized about it.
That's also true, right? It's sort of like just the bare bones kind of minimum, not a lot of explanation. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so let's see how to make this maybe a little bit better. So, right, what I just mentioned already is that you really don't want to just put everything on one running page to scroll through. And also, even though Canvas allows you to put like lots of cute little images and stuff, you know, maybe make sure it doesn't get too cluttered and just label everything really clearly. And I think one really good practice for keeping things really simple and easy to see is that you have just one module for every week that has clearly labeled subpages. And then maybe having a separate module for organizational things like the Zoom link and information about deadlines and office hours at the beginning. So here's what that might look like. Right, so this is just from last fall. Here I had like one module at the beginning that was called Organizational Matters, and it had two sub-pages, one for office hours and contact and one for the syllabus. If I was teaching online on Zoom, I would probably throw in another one that just says, you know, Zoom links, so the students can immediately find the Zoom links right when they log into the course page for your Canvas course. And then, right, I have here week 1, week 2, and I would just like have that running for the semester. And for each week, I would have kind of a to-do list where I show students what they need to do, and then also the class material. So if I gave out a handout or slides or something, they could find that there. And one thing I want to highlight here is that if you look at the bottom to this purple bar, it says you are currently logged into student view. This is a really nice feature of Canvas. And when you're in your own view, there's just a button that's at the right that's kind of near here where it says on the right, view course stream, view course calendar, view course notifications. It would say go to student view, and then it will show you how the page would look like from a student's point of view. And that's a really important feature, because if you integrate slightly more interesting kind of features into your Canvas page, you want to make sure that you see what it looks like for the student, and also it's useful so you know how to explain to them what they need to do to interact with this functionality. Okay, so then if you went to one of my pages here, for example, to do for week 2, it would have links to the different readings that the students are supposed to do, and it would have a link for the quiz. And again, if you have that same structure every week, the students get used to it, and it will really, you know, reduce the confusion and students' inability to find things. Okay, now, right, so you want to make everything really consistent. You can use the student view button. One idea that's a really cool idea is that you can make a little video that demonstrates where students can find things on the course page. And you can easily record a video like that with Zoom or with some other recording software. We're going to cover that later when we talk about recording videos, but I just want to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to just show you this video that, or a little part of this video that Dan Sturgis recorded for his class.
Hello and welcome to Environmental Ethics. This is your course tour. On the home page, you will find link to the syllabus, That includes Zoom office hour information, communication policies. Best way to reach me is by email. Some course information, including textbook information, either the 6th or 7th edition of Environmental Ethics by Lewis and Paul Poyman will work.
Okay, so, right, I don't have to show you the whole video for you to get the idea, right? So the idea is really just you kind of put your class into, or your Canvas page into the student view mode, so the students see the same thing when they go into the page, and you just kind of like talk over clicking on various things to say, hey, here's where you find this, here's where you find that, and then if you put that right at the top of your page, and you can alert your students that it's there, and so they can get a really easy tour on how to like engage with the important features of your course page. One more thing that I want to highlight is that you have control over what appears in this navigation bar on the left on your student's Zoom page. So for example, right here, I was in my student view mode, and it has like announcements, assignments, discussions, grades, and so on. But depending on which features of Zoom of Canvas you're using or not using, you might not want to have things displayed there that the students don't need. And the way you control that is how you see in the left image here, you go to settings, which is at the bottom of your navigation bar there on the left. And then you go to navigation, and then you can see here that first of all, you can decide in what order you want these things to appear in the navigation bar. And then down there, you can drag items down to hide them from the students. And then once you've sorted it in the way you want, you would have to scroll all the way down and press the save button. And that determines then what the students are seeing here. So for example, right, if you, for some reason, don't use discussion boards, you can hide that, because why would it have to be there if the students never use it, right? So you can totally control that. Okay, so one functionality now that I want to show you that is really neat is audio and video feedback in in Canvas. So a lot of you have used Canvas before, have probably used the speed grader to give written comments on assignments and to assign grades and points. If you haven't used the speed grader, there are lots of nice video tutorials online, and really the main benefit of the speed grader is that you can quickly jump from one assignment to the next, and you can also anonymize the grading on speed grader. One worry about online teaching is that it's too impersonal, so that you really don't establish a good connection with your students. And the idea is that you can use the audio and video feedback on SpeedGrader to give students more personal feedback. And if you don't aim for perfection, I think this is even faster than writing comments. And I've also found that it comes across as nicer than giving written comments sometimes when you say something critical. So I really like this because it helps me do something cool for the students, and it doesn't actually cost me extra time. So first, to show you how to anonymize grading in the SpeedGrader. So when you're in the SpeedGrader and you click on this little gear wheel up there and you go to options, then you find that this little window pops up and it says hide student names in the SpeedGrader. So if you do that, you can very easily anonymize your grading, which a lot of people think is one of the best practices for teaching. But now let's look at how this audio and video feedback works. And I've recorded a little video of me recording video feedback, so I'm going to just show you that. Okay, I'm going to show you now how to record an audio or a video comment in the SpeedGrader on Canvas. So here would be the student's paper usually, and if you wanted to write comments, you could just put them here in this box, or you could upload them. If you want to record an audio or video comment, you would just click on this little button here, And now you can record either just an audio comment or a comment with video as well. So we're going to try a comment that has both. Start recording. Dear student, I read your paper and I was very pleased with how clearly you wrote it. Unfortunately, you were a little bit over the word limit, but I thought that overall you did a very good job. Okay, so now what you can do is you can replay this to see if you're happy with it. Dear student, I read your paper and I was very pleased with how clearly you wrote it. Unfortunately, you were a little bit over the word limit, but I thought that overall you did a very good job. So if you're happy with how that went, then you would click save. You could also start over if you clicked over here. And see. No, is it saving? Yep, okay. So now you see your comment has been submitted and the student can now click here to see the comment when they go in and they are looking at the feedback for their paper. Right. Okay, so that was that. I'm going to now see if you guys have any questions, and we have some time for that. And then after that, Zach is going to take us through discussion boards and to-do lists. So if you have a question, just, unmute yourself, go ahead, ask.
I was interested in hearing more about the downsides of everything on one page. So I kind of like the just scroll down to the date and you'll find everything you need to know. But I don't know, maybe that doesn't make sense.
I mean, I think one worry is just that depending on how much content you have on the site, that it just, becomes like a lot to scroll through. And that if you have it in separate modules, it's kind of easier for students kind of to find that. The other thing too is that, depending on, if you have different quizzes or activities or so on, you can have these as sort of like direct things to click on in the modules if you have them for every week. So I guess it depends on like how complicated your course setup is for that. But yeah, I think the idea is just that if you have like reasonably complicated or rich content, or you have like, explanations and stuff, breaking it up is just a little bit easier and it's easier for students to find.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so maybe we'll move on then to discussion boards and to-do lists with Zach. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides here and then go ahead, Zach.
Right, I'm gonna load up my slides and here we go. Can everybody see that? Yep, all right, good. So I'm gonna talk a bit about discussion boards. And of course, there's lots of different things that you can use them for. I use them for post-Zoom discussion groups. So if they were in small breakout groups, they would kind of tell me what they did in the discussion boards. That's one thing, but you can use them for lots of different purposes. I'm going to be talking about two different things here. So the first is about writing better discussion questions. I'm going to talk about this very briefly, and then we'll talk about creating small group discussion boards, and that'll take a little bit longer. So for some reason, there's a lot of resources, of course, online about writing online discussion questions. You can find a bunch of them just by searching. Here are a few that you can check out if you don't have any background of doing this. And you can kind of go from there if you'd like. And once, as Julia said, we're not going to be doing deep dives into pedagogy here, but the goal is to kind of show you how this technology can work. Yet one thing, like we do want to be thinking about what kind of questions we're using in our online discussion boards. So one thing to kind of think about is aiming for a golden mean, and sorry to all the Aristotle folks out there, it's just too useful of a concept to not apply here. You want your questions to be open-ended enough so that students are generating ideas and can make comments, and they're not just throwing up course material. But you also want to make sure that they're focused enough so students don't end up in outer space. When you run discussions in person, I'm sure many of you have had this experience where you have to kind of reel something in. You know, you might have the student that goes to extreme skepticism anytime you talk about something, and it's kind of easier to do this in person. But in online discussion boards, if you're not constantly monitoring them, which we can't really do, then it can easily degenerate into just very, very off-topic things. So you want to try to like make them open-ended, but also focused. And one suggestion we have then is that it's really good to be transparent with what you're expecting from discussion board posts. So for example, you might make it clear that things like, I agree, or I found what you said very interesting, or this is a good point, just by themselves aren't sufficient responses if students are replying to them. You can tell them that you want more. And one good practice then is to consider providing some kind of model responses early in the semester for what you'd kind of be looking for. Don't make them, you know, super, super hard, but just give the students an idea what kind of responses you'd like to see them making. And I have two more thoughts here to think about. So one thing that you can do with discussion boards is that if you write the question in certain ways, you might end up with all of your students giving the same responses. So if it's something like, for example, apply the ethical theories to this certain case that I've thought up. Students are going to be having similar replies, and if they're getting the correct answers, then they're going to be, you know, all the same. That's not very good for a discussion. It's something that can work in class, but it might not be good for a discussion board. Instead, you could do something like this. You could have students post their own cases that they think we can apply our ethical theories to. Then other students can reply to those cases by applying actually the moral theories to them. So they say, okay, well, given this other person's case, here's how I think Kantian ethics would evaluate the case. And then they post a reply with that. And then you could have students follow up where they evaluate those replies and say, yes, I think student X was right about how the Kantian deontology interprets this case. So notice in the first example, you have students kind of writing all the same thing. And this might be something you want them to do, but if you want to have more of a discussion where students are working together, you do something more like the second one. So think about what kind of responses you want in the discussion boards when you're writing your questions. Also, something that you can do, and I'm sure other people have done this, right, is that you have the students apply material from past readings to new readings in some kind of open-ended way. So don't write the questions for things that you think that there's a clear answer for how author X would look at author Y's argument. Instead of like, maybe ones that are more open-ended kind of work where different interpretations, depending on what you're looking at, you get different responses. I also think this is a good idea because online courses, you know, you might want to try to integrate your online course to make it less like very small segments and more of a kind of long continuous course. So those are some suggestions there. Now, usually when you set up a discussion board in Canvas, the default is to have it set up so the whole class is part of the discussion. But you can also use Canvas to set up smaller group discussions, and this can avoid these kind of long, big free-for-all discussion boards that maybe you've ended up with. There are different ways to create these kind of small group discussion boards. Canvas often has different ways of doing the same thing, but I just want to show you a really easy one right now. So once again, I'm going to have things that kind of pop up in the upper right-hand corner. If anything's blocked, you can just move that Zoom video panel around so that you can see stuff. Don't be scared to play with it. So if you're in Canvas, I have the navigation pane here, and I've clicked on discussions. And this is for my sandbox, so I don't have any discussions here set up. But when you want to create a new discussion, you go to this big blue button in the upper right-hand corner. After you've clicked it, you'll get this screen. This is zoomed out so that we can see the stuff that we want to down here, but you usually have to scroll down. And there's the basic things like your discussion title goes here. This is where you put the general description of your discussion board. But I want to focus on a few things down here. Notice that I've checked these two different boxes. So this box means that users have to post before they can see what other students have posted. So if you're using a discussion where students are going to have a similar answer, so it's more like applying the ethical theory to a case that you've given them, you might want to click this one, because then they can't see what other students have posted and then just parrot it back. Also, if you want to use your discussions as something that's graded, you'll need to click this graded option. So those are two ones to look at, and other things like allowing thread replies can be pretty cool too. But for now, because we want to try to create a group discussion, we're going to be looking at this. And so what we'll do is we'll click that box there, which will open up this new window. Okay, so this is where you'll create your group set name. Now, group set is exactly what it sounds like. It's a set of groups. So your group set will be a distribution of your students to different groups. Now, the cool thing is you can have different group sets, so you can have different distributions of students to groups. And you might want to do that if you want, students to be working in different groups at different points. I'm not going to talk about self-sign-up. From what I've read, this looks like a bad thing to do in general. So we're going to look at how you can distribute and create groups yourself. You have two options, and the first one is to create groups manually, and this is the default. I'm not going to talk about that, but if we use this one, then we can create an automatic distribution of students into groups. So here I've filled in a couple little things. So I've called my group set name discussion groups 1. I'm thinking that, well, I might have different group sets of discussions so that so students aren't always just talking with the same people. And I'm splitting my groups into 10, or my students into 10 groups. Now, why am I doing this? Well, this is a really cool box here that I've checked. If you've used Canvas before and you have 2 sections of the same course, you have the option to merge those 2 sections into one Canvas course. This makes it easier so that you don't have to post the same things to 2 distinct Canvas pages. But if you don't click this box, then the students from your 3 p.m. class might be put in groups with students from your 5 p.m. class. So if you want to guarantee that in your merged Canvas course, all of your students are in groups with members in their same class and their section, then you just have to click this button. So that's a cool feature. Okay, so I've filled this out, I've clicked my buttons, and now I'm going to click on Save. This is what will populate after you've saved this, okay? Now I haven't filled in lots of details, right? I haven't told how many points this is worth, so it just says 0. I had a very boring topic title, so your title will appear there. But the cool thing now is you have the opportunity as the instructor to access any of the students' small discussion groups. So the students in group 1, for example, won't be able to see stuff in any of the other discussion groups. So it's a very self-contained thing for our small groups. So I'm going to click on one of those and show you what it looks like. So if you go into it, I've clicked on group 6 here, and what you'll see is the discussion board assignment that you have, and you'll see all of the different student posts here. Okay, so this is a kind of cool thing. Now, I've shown you how to create group sets while making your discussion, and you can just use that to create different group sets if you'd like. But you can also manage them in the group sets page as well. Now, I'm not going to do a full tutorial on this, but I'll give you a link where you can look into this more. I just want to show you a quick overview of what that screen would look like. So here, notice in the navigation panel, I've clicked on people. Now, usually if you click on people, it'll default to bringing you to the everyone group set. And the everyone one will just kind of list all of the students in your class with their details. But if you want, you can create group sets yourself by clicking on this blue button. Now, I should note, if you're creating group sets while you're making the discussion, they're also going to be popping up here. And so you can manage them here and move people around. You might want to have different sets for different groups of people. And when you have it populated with students, you take the students and you move them into the different groups. And so you can create the groups here. There are great tutorials on Canvas for this, so I'm not going to talk about it too much more. But I just want you to know this is an option and something you can do. So here's the big resources drop on you for group discussions. I've talked about this second one where we've talked about assigning groups to discussion boards. Looking at the group sets that I just showed you, you can find more information here. And Julie has already talked about the speed grader a bit, but you can use the speed grader to grade your discussions. And it's cool because when you switch between different students, you see everything that they've posted. And you can alternate between that and looking at the entire discussion. So speed grader for grading, you can look at how to do that here. I should also note too, just with the grading discussions with SpeedGrader, you can also do video feedback or audio feedback in those. So this can make your grading quick. All right, the second thing that I'd like to talk about is using weekly to-do sheets for students. Now, this wasn't an idea that I had on my own. I had a discussion board when we were transitioning to remote teaching during spring 2020, just trying to get feedback from students about like how to do the class, what they think would work for them. And so I gave my proposals and stuff and they commented on them, but I also asked them what they think, what they could come up with and they find helpful. And one thing that the students pretty much unanimously wanted were weekly to-do sheets that had information on due dates of assignments, meetings, like when we're going to be on Zoom, if there are not going to be any Zoom meetings on a day, and suggestions on what they should be doing during the week. Now, this, of course, is probably a result of being so abruptly transferred to remote teaching. But I think that this can also serve a nice function just in general, so your students can kind of see what their week looks like in your class. So here's the very easy way to do this. First, just download some kind of to-do list template or something. So here's one that I use with the sample one that I'll show you on the next page. You can click on that, use the password OTT, Online Teacher Training 2020, and you can download it and look at it. And the second thing, just update and post these each week, maybe in your to-do list module where you could just have the weekly to-do list for students to look at. And you might even consider emailing it out to them. So what I did is I would post them on Saturdays for my classes and then send them out in an email. Now this is a little hand-holdy, and I usually try not to be as hand-holdy with my students, but I think with remote instruction, it's good to remember many students haven't done this before. And so being a little bit more hand-holdy might be useful and be something to consider doing. So here's just a sample of one of the weeks, and this is the one that you can access if you want. I have things like, okay, we're meeting the Zoom meeting at class time here. You can see that there's a writing assignment due on Monday, although I gave them an extension until Wednesday. They had to turn it in before the Zoom on Wednesday, so I have little notes there. Stuff about watching the lecture. So they were watching this. I did this as a kind of hybrid online remote. So they would watch an asynchronous lecture, and then they would have a discussion group, and we'd have discussion in class. And so then I told them, look, optional, you can join me on Zoom during the class time if you have questions. And notice on Friday, I have something for the next week, just telling them what they should be doing. Okay, so something like this, the students really liked it. And so you might consider doing it. Now, notice that this looks very, very busy, right? You might want to do these, but one other idea is to have just kind of general schedules that have a general outline of what a week in your course looks like with deadlines and things like that. It's a good practice to try to keep a consistent weekly schedule. Sure, you're gonna have tests or quizzes at some times, so it won't be the same thing every week, but your course probably has a general outline, skeleton. So it might be nice to provide one of these kinds of to-do sheets in the organizational matters to show them. And you could include this in your course tour. So here's kind of like a general one that I mocked up for you. Notice it's a lot less busy, but it just has things like, okay, there's gonna be a writing assignment that's due before class time. I'm still modeling this on an asynchronous, synchronous hybrid. So here it's watch lecture during the class time. And then I have a post-lecture assignment that's due by Wednesday. Okay, you get the idea. I don't have to go through each bullet point. But notice that this is kind of sparse, and this is just gonna be the general outline of what students should expect to be doing in the class. And these things can definitely help your students. All right, I'm done with that. So are there any questions? If not, we can move over to Julia. So you can unmute your mic or type them in the chat if you'd like.
Thanks, Zach. I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Just sort of a niche idea for setting up small group assignments, because I'll be teaching the writing class in the fall, and I was wondering if there was a way to set up small groups, maybe pairs, but have it be anonymous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that students can't see who they're paired with, so they could like do anonymous proofreading of each other's papers or something. I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily need a tutorial into how to do it, but I'm just wondering if that's like a possibility, or does Canvas necessitate that people know who's in their group?
As far as I can tell with Canvas, so I think that's a great idea. I don't know if Canvas can let you do things anonymously, but I'm pretty sure that it does not allow it.
Okay.
Tomorrow we'll be talking about some other kinds of technologies and add-ons. And so I'm going to be using this platform Piazza that does allow for anonymous posts and things. And so that might be the avenue that you might consider going in that one.
Cool. Cool. Well, I'll be there. Thanks.
Yep. No problem. Okay. I see something from Colton in the chat. He asked, did you experience many issues with students that had technical problems or issues navigating Canvas during your online courses? If so, how were they handled? So I didn't have too many problems because I broke things up in a nice kind of readable way. But I did have some problems with students attending Zooms. They didn't have good places to do them, or they had some kind of problems with the internet. And so with those, we just kind of figured them out on an ad hoc basis. But it's probably a good idea to think about how you're going to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, also, I mean, that's why we've been kind of talking a little bit about how to teach your students to do this technology, right? So I think if you have a general course tour, you could cover a lot in that, but you could also, for example, have little videos that walk them through how they can do specific things. Another idea is too that if they have to do something new, for example, they have to do a quiz or a discussion board, you could set up for like a very small point value, just like a dummy version where they just have to like log in and try it out before they do kind of the real thing that's graded. And then you can just see like at the beginning of the semester and make sure that they know how to do it. And then when they do the first real one, they have sort of like figured it out already. And oh yeah, so Ted is asking about office hours. So yeah, that's the next topic. So unless there's other questions, I'm just going to move on to talking about office hours. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share. Okay, so scheduling office hours, right? So presumably a lot of us will be holding office hours via Zoom in the fall. Even if you're teaching an in-person or a hybrid class, you might consider not making students, leave their house when they don't need to, or maybe you don't want to be in in close contact with people if it's not necessary. So it's good to have the option of Zoom office hours. One thing you can do is just post a link to a Zoom room and just let the students show up. But of course, if you have multiple students showing up at the same time, that might get pretty awkward. And I think a better solution for that is to let students make appointments for office hours on Canvas. And the Canvas calendar is set up so that you can post office hour appointments of various lengths as you desire, and students can conveniently reserve those and cancel them. And I already started using this before online teaching even started for in-person office hours, and I think it's just a great functionality in Canvas. So the way it works is like this. First, what you need to do to set this up is you need to go into your Canvas calendar that you navigate to by clicking on this little calendar item on the very left. And then to populate your calendar with office hour appointments, you would click here on create a new event. Now, when you do that, you get this little pop-up window and you want to select appointment group. And when you have appointment group selected, you can actually populate your calendar with lots of office hour appointments at the same time. So what you do is you select the name, presumably office hours. For the location, you could put here your Zoom link. And then down here where it says calendar, you can check which classes this is supposed to be for. So if you're teaching multiple classes, you could either have all of your office hours be accessible to all of your students, or you could say, oh, my Wednesday office hours I'm going to put in for the one class and my Thursday office hours for the other class. So you can select that as you wish. Now then here where it says date and time range, what you want to do is you want to put in the blocks during which your office hours happen. So for example, I might say, okay, I always have office hours from 10 to 11 on these specific dates, and you can populate that for as many weeks as you like. And then you have to decide how long each reserved slot is supposed to be. So you get a default here of 30 minutes. I usually make them a little bit shorter. So for example, here I said 15 minutes, and then you have to click go. This is really important because if you don't click go, it doesn't work. And once you click go, you can see that your slots that you entered, your 10 to 11 o'clock slots, get broken up into these 15-minute appointments. Now here with my options, I usually say limit each time slot to one user because I think it's common that you want your students to sign up for individual office hours. I don't allow my students to see who has signed up. I don't think that's necessary. This is a little mysterious, this last item. Limit participants to attend one appointments. It's unclear what the time range is within which they can do one appointment. Is it like one appointment per day, one appointment per week, one appointment per forever? I don't know. So I usually just leave that unchecked and students can just sign up as they please. So now once I've done all of this, I'm going to click publish. And then you can see here on your calendar that these slots are going to appear. And when a student reserves one, it'll change color and say, so-and-so has reserved this slot. And if you were signed up to receive notifications from Canvas, you'll also get an email that says, so-and-so has signed up for this office hour slot. Also, students can use the same functionality to cancel their appointments, which is nice because then you don't deal with kind of random no-shows. One thing that's important is that you really need to explain to your students how to access this, because when you're in the student view mode, you can see here, right? I'm logged into student view. These green appointment slots are not automatically appearing on their calendar. They have to do something to see the appointments that are available. So what they have to do is they have to click here on find appointment. And when they do that, what they find is like here in the top left corner, it asks them to select a class for which they want to make an appointment. And so they'll select your class. And once they click submit, then the open slots will show up in green on their calendar the way I could see them before. And then they can just click on whatever they want to reserve, and they can also go back into that menu and cancel an appointment that they no longer want. But this is a case where if you just tell the students, reserve your office hours on Canvas calendar, they might not know how to do that because it's not so obvious that you have to click this find appointment button. So what I usually do is in my little organizational matters menu on Canvas, where it says office hours, the location where I tell them when my office hours are is also where I give them a little step-by-step explanation of how to find this. I say you have to go into your calendar, you have to click this button, and then you reserve. Or you could also include that in your little video tour, right? So, but once they know how to do that, I find that it works really well. And then, you know, they would just show up through the Zoom link in your Zoom office hours at their reserved appointment time, and then you don't run into the problem that you have multiple students coming at the same time and you have to figure out how to manage them in a waiting room or how to tell them to come back later. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so that's how to do the office hours on Canvas. Any questions? You can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself.
Hi. I think that if students use a Canvas app, they have problems signing up for office hours. Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's just something to let them know about, is that they'll have to use the web page because like half of them will try to use the app and not be able to do it.
That's true. I've had some problems with that last year. I have no idea if this has maybe been fixed, like, right, Canvas continuously gets updated. So it's possible that that's been something that's been upgrade it in the app. But yeah, it definitely works through the web page. Whether it works in the app right now, not clear.
I have a question. How do you sign up for notifications on Canvas?
Ah, good question. Zach, do you know quickly how to get into that, or should I? You're muted. Zach, you're muted.
I knew this at one point, but I don't remember exactly. I can do a quick search and see.
Yeah, why don't Zach? Why don't we do this, Zach? Why don't you start your module on quizzes, and while you're doing the quiz module, I'll figure out how to do this, and then we'll answer it after the quizzes module.
I've actually already found the website where you can look it up.
Perfect.
So we'll talk a bit about finding more Canvas resources, but Canvas has lots of resources, and it's pretty easy to find them, even just by doing quick Google searches.
Yeah. Do you want to share your screen real quick and show us?
Yeah, sure. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. So they have the set of default ones, and what you do is you go to your account, and then apparently click on your notifications. So that should pop up there. And then you get a very busy screen with different course activities, the email that you want them sent to, and apparently, I don't know all of these different ones, but you can see these different ways of, I think you can, with 4, you can do something. If you don't want to receive a notification, you do the X. This, you can do it so you receive a weekly notification. This is for daily, and this is right away. So that's what you can do with that. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my other screen, and unless other people have questions, we can go to the quizzes. All right, let's move to quizzes then. Okay, so if you don't already know the basics of Canvas quizzes, you can check out this video that OIT at CU has set up. It's an hour and a half, and they kind of go through all the basics of just a total beginner's guide. We'll talk about other resources too, but this video is pretty good. I'm going to be reviewing 2 things. The first thing I want to talk about is how to give students extended time on a quiz. So if they have an extra time accommodation, you can do this in Canvas, and it's really easy. So this is just a good thing to know how to do. And then I want to talk about Canvas quizzes, some of the settings, and trying to reduce cheating. Because quizzes online, there's more opportunities for students to cheat. And so we can talk about some ways of trying to avoid that. So when you're assigning extra time on Canvas quizzes, you can give students extra time. But one weird little bug about Canvas is you have to actually publish the quiz first. So you have to make the quiz available to all students to see before you can moderate it and give students extra time. So a good practice then is if you have a student who you know has extra accommodation time for their quizzes, contact them and let them know that they shouldn't start taking it immediately after the quiz is posted. Now, there is a way where you can actually give students extra time while they are taking the quiz. So it's not the end of the world, but this is kind of a suggestion I have for you. I'm going to go through some visuals to show you how to do this, but there's a cool link that I've provided here too that has directions on how to do it. So let's look at some of these. So notice once again, you have to have your quiz published before you can get to this moderate quiz. And moderate the quiz is what you're going to do to add this extra time. So we'll click on that link now. All right, I've blocked out all the students' names, right, and deleted it here. But now when you're moderating the quiz, what you do to choose a student and give them extra time is you click on this to select them. And you could do this with multiple students then at the same time. So you could choose all of the students that you have to give extra time if you wanted to. And then you go to this little pencil icon to edit it. After you do that, something like this box will pop up. You'll have your student's name there. And notice you can do things like giving somebody extra attempts. So everyone already gets 2. So if you wanted to give them an extra attempt, you put that number here. One thing to note with all of these 2 functions is the number you're writing here is the extra amount. It's not the total amount. So we're looking at extra time, and this tells us everyone already gets 30 minutes. So if I had a student with a 1.5 time accommodation, I add half of that here, so 15 minutes. After you type that in, you click your save button, and you'll see that underneath the student's name, it has the extra minutes that they get. And that's all there is to it. It's very, very easy to do. So you shouldn't be scared with using Canvas quizzes and using accommodations. Let's talk quickly. Well, this is actually a little bit of a longer talk with Canvas quizzes and cheating. So there are some things we can do to make it a little more difficult, but the reality is that if the students really want to cheat, they're probably going to be able to find a way. But there are some settings that I think can help disincentivize cheating overall, and that people talk about here. One thing that you'll kind of see if you're looking into this is people highlight these kind of different things that incentivize cheating. So when students can get the answers very easily, they're more inclined to cheat. When there's a sufficiently big benefit, so if there's a lot at stake, that kind of incentivizes them to cheat often. And also, if it's unlikely that they're going to get caught, they can cheat easily and they don't risk much. This also incentivizes it. This is kind of, I think of it as kind of an expected value type thing. So students unconsciously do some kind of expected value calculations. So being online can make it much easier for them not to get caught. So we're not going to be talking about using software like Proctorio. There's some serious issues with privacy in Proctorio, and I'll leave it to you to look into those if you want. But if we're not using some kind of nanny state, you know, all-seeing eye Big Brother software to watch them cheat when they're taking quizzes, two things we can kind of do is we can make it a little harder for them to get the answers easily, and we can reduce the benefit of cheating. So I'll talk about each of these. So two ways to make cheating harder are to write test questions that are more cheat resistant, they're less cheat friendly, and Canvas gives us some tools that we can use as well. So one thing that you might think of about test questions, the multiple choice versus short answer. So generally it seems like short answers they can be harder to cheat on, but you know, grading becomes more difficult. So you're gonna have these various trade-offs. But we really shouldn't think that short answers are always the easiest. For example, if your short answer question is something like, what is the point of Singer's drowning child in the shallow pond thought experiment? That's very, very easy to cheat on. So if you copy this phrase and just search for this in Google, you can get lots of answers to it, right? So that'd be very easy to cheat on there. So I have a few suggestions here for you that I've outlined. One thing you can do is you can write questions where the students have to give their own novel examples or cases. So instead of, you know, how would a utilitarian framework work with the Jim and the natives case? Instead of doing something like that, which would be easy to search for, you can have them create a scenario themselves that illustrates a certain utilitarian framework. If you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, one thing is to avoid questions that are just on this remembering level. I have a link there that later you can check out if you're not familiar with this, but the remembering level is just basically kind of like a fact-based level. So something like, what is validity, is something that'd be easy to search, easy to cheat on, and that's just asking like kind of like what a fact is. But you can frame these questions in different ways. So you could say, suppose we have a valid argument and the conclusion is false. What can we infer from this argument? So that's something that'd be a little bit more difficult for them to do. And one setting that I'm going to show you is you can use question groups in Canvas and make it so that students don't all get the same questions. So question groups is a nice way to kind of make it that students aren't going to necessarily be taking the same exact test or quiz. And I'll show you more about that soon. So let's look at some of these Canvas tools. There's some options that we can do when we're setting up the quiz, and we'll look at those in a second. You can also randomize the question order in which your questions appear, so students can't just, you know, they don't have the same exact order of their questions. And you can use question groups so that students don't all get the exact same questions. So here's a little video that I've made going over some of these settings in Canvas that you can use. So let's look at some of these options in Canvas that can help disincentivize cheating. So I'll go here to this blue button to create a new quiz. And here's where you can put the title and your instructions. Up here is where questions are, and so this is where you'll be inputting your questions. But let's go back to the details right now. So I want to look at these different options we have. There's a couple options I want to highlight. The first is the time limit. So if this is unchecked, then your students have unlimited time to take the quiz. If they have unlimited time, this might give them the opportunity to go look things up online, to review slides, to look at books. They really just have unlimited time to take the quiz. So one thing that's been suggested a lot of places to reduce cheating is to use a time limit. So if we set a time limit for 60 minutes, that means after 60 minutes, the student's quiz is automatically submitted with whatever work they've done. Okay. The next one that I want to bring our attention to is this box here. So this is let students see their quiz responses. Incorrect questions will be marked in student feedback. If this is unchecked, then after they finish the quiz, they just get a screen that says they've submitted the quiz and they don't get to look at it anymore. So that might be the most secure way to make sure that students aren't using screenshots or looking back at the quiz and sharing answers with other people. But there might be some pedagogical reasons that you don't want to do that. You might want them to be able to review it. So if we click this and only that's clicked, what that means is after they finish the quiz, they can look at their quiz and see which answers they got correct. So those will be marked. And questions they got incorrect, it'll only tell them that they got that question incorrect. It will not tell them what the correct answer choice is. Now this box right under here is also important. If it's unchecked, then that means after a student's finished submitting and their quiz report is done, then they can access it anytime they want. If you click this, then that means that after they finish the quiz, they can only look at it then. After they click out, they no longer can see their quiz answers. The last box we can check into this is letting students see the correct answers. So if you click this one, what that means is that after they've submitted their quiz, they can look, they get a report where they see which answers they got correct, and the ones that they missed, it tells them which answer choice was the correct one there too. So if you have this checked, you can choose if you want to set some time limits of when the correct answers begin to show and when they're hidden. If you don't fill anything out, then it means that they instantly get to see it. So given everything I have checked here, what will happen after a student takes the quiz is they'll be able to look and they'll be able to see which questions they got correct, which ones they missed, and what the correct answers are. But after they've clicked out of it, they won't be able to look at it again. If we click this, then they can look at it at any point. So I think the most secure thing is to leave this entirely unchecked. But depending on your pedagogical purposes, you might want to let them be able to see their quiz responses even if they don't see the correct answer or see the correct answer. Okay. The last option regarding cheating has to do with this show one question at a time. It comes default unchecked, and when it's unchecked, what that means is when they get the quiz, they can scroll down and see all the quiz questions and go through them. Some guides say that checking this is something that can deter cheating because they can only look at one question at a time and they can't just do these massive screenshots or saves of all of the questions. So you can do that. If you click this one, then that means after they've answered, they can't go back to it. All of the guides I've said have suggested not having this, but having this one checked. So those are some of the options you can use. We'll talk about shuffle answers in a second. Okay, so that's a very short guide to doing this. But I want to talk about two more of these things and just highlight some issues that you might get with time tests. So time tests can raise some potential problems. If a student loses their internet connection, it just submits whatever they had. And so if they don't have multiple attempts, then they haven't finished taking the quiz. If the student accidentally logs off Canvas, then they can't take the quiz again. And things that can also happen are students just leave the page, to go shopping or go on Amazon or whatever they do, and then they forget about it. And once again, at the end of the time limit, Canvas records the score as is. So there are some problems that you can get with timed tests. If you're deciding to use them, consider how you can accommodate these problems as they arise. So one way is possibly dropping some of the quizzes. So you can tell them, look, you can't resubmit it. I'm not going to give you an extra attempt, but we drop quizzes. You could allow multiple attempts just right off the bat by changing your features or your options. Or you could have some policy where students can contact you if something happens to arrange another attempt. I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but you should just think about this and have some kind of policy in place and some way to accommodate this if this arises. Whatever it is, make sure you decide it early and you stay consistent. Kind of tying into something that Julie and I have talked about, it's good that when we're introducing this new technology with students to give them some practice doing it. So you might think of some kind of practicing Canvas quizzes quiz with your students. If your students aren't familiar with Canvas quizzes, so they've never done them before, taking their first one when their grade's on the line can be a really stressful experience. And even if they are familiar with Canvas quizzes, they might have done them sometimes or maybe lots, they might not be familiar with the options and the settings that you're choosing. So one suggestion is to make the quiz count, like do one of these practice canvassing quizzes quiz, wow, and make it count for a bit of their grade and just give them full credit for taking it. So if you're doing this, use the different question types. Canvas allows you to use lots of different question types. So just use anything that you're going to use on the real quizzes and use the settings that you'll be using. And once, as I kind of hinted in the beginning, consider using this type of idea and this model with any of the new technologies you're using. You can record these short introduction videos and then have them practice doing it. And this is just a good idea because after all, when they're learning how to use this tech, they are in fact learning, so you can justifiably give them some credit for doing so. Okay, I'm gonna show you this video now about how to randomize question order in Canvas quizzes, so let's check this out.
How to randomize question order in a Canvas quiz. So I'm already in my quiz section and I'm in the questions. If you want to randomize answers, that option's in shuffle, answers and details. The questions themselves, what we're going to do is I'm going to scroll down and click new question group. I can even leave it named group because I'm just going to have one of these. Now, pick how many questions do I have? Well, I'm going to have it randomize all of my questions. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, all of my questions will be worth 1 point each. Great. Create group. So now I put in 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I have 4 questions for it to pick, and it's going to randomly spit those out in whatever order. If you have 5 questions, you'd want that to say 5. Let's go ahead and hit save. And let's just go back in real quick, edit, questions, and now it is not displaying that thing saying there weren't enough questions because we've saved it.
Okay, so that's how easy it is to randomize your questions. It's very, very simple to do this. Now you notice the guide talks about shuffling answers. One thing to note about shuffling answers, it'll shuffle the answer choices that you have for every question on your quiz. You might, one drawback of this is there's no way to lock any answer choices into their positions. So if you shuffle answers, things like all of the above and none of the above might appear in very weird places. Answer choices like A and B don't work with this either. So depending on like what kind of questions you're writing, it might not matter, but you should just know this about that shuffle answer choice. Okay, so we looked at how you can randomize when your quiz questions come up, but you can also do this to make it so that Canvas randomly selects some questions out of a group without choosing all of them. So if you do this, then students will answer different questions, so they won't all necessarily have the same quiz. You can do it in a very quick way using the same stuff from that video. So you input your questions just like the beginning of that dude's video, and you put all of them in the same group in the same way as the video. The only difference is you're going to change the number of questions that are selected from it. So if you have 4 questions in there, choose some lower number, such as 2. Then when a student takes the quiz, it will select 2 of those questions for the student to answer. So that's a really rough and ready way of doing that. Another way is you can set up some question banks, and there's some pros and cons of doing that. I made a video at the end of the slide, but I'm not going to share that now. You can watch it then, and you can also watch this YouTube video for it. One thing to think about is, what is the point of your quizzes? So like talking about this kind of expected value, you can realize that it'd be very easy to incentivize cheating by doing something like this. You only have 1 test, it's worth the entire grade, they have unlimited time to take it, and it shows the correct answers afterwards. I'd hazard that you're guaranteeing that somebody is going to cheat on that. But one thing to really think about with online quizzes is that you might reconsider the function that you're using them in. And because it's so much easier to cheat for students, you might consider using them differently. So here are a couple ideas. One thing you can do is to reduce the stakes of your quizzes and tests in the course overall and individually. This is mentioned often as a kind of inclusive teaching practice, and we can talk more about that if you want. You can increase the frequency of them, so there's more quizzes. Once again, you're reducing the stakes so there are less points, covering less material. And you might consider that instead of using quizzes as assessment tools, you use them as learning tools. Let's look at 2 quick models using some of the settings and things that you could do with Canvas. So we'll call this the unlimited tries until you get it right method. And so the goal of this is to for them to use the quiz to self-assess their own learning, and then use the quiz to fill the gaps in their understanding of the material. So here are some settings if you wanted to do this. So allow multiple attempts, unlimited, right? Or you can do like type 150, whatever. Choose to let students see their quiz responses, but don't show the correct answers. One thing you can do is you can set up some general feedback for the incorrect answer choices. So for one wrong answer choice, you can say, if they chose that, it'll say, look, review page 40 for why this answer choice isn't correct. Or you can have something with, this isn't what the author thinks is true, or she thinks that it's true, but it's not, the reason she gives. Review these pages to get the correct answer. So this is kind of just used as a learning tool for them. And if you want to learn how to do the feedback, you can check out that link there. And then, since you're using it as a learning tool, you can make the quizzes low stakes and use them as kind of like a homework assignment. So another thing you can do is just use assign more low stakes quizzes, have them count for less of the overall grade. You could consider dropping some or letting them make up some of the missed points with some mechanism. And ultimately the goal with it is to reduce the pressure on them to get perfect scores, so they don't feel as incentivized. So some settings you can use: show 1 question at a time if you're doing this. You can use question groups so that students don't all get the same questions. You'll have to write more questions, but you can do it with that. Or you can just randomize the questions so they have the same questions, but they're what's it called? They're not in the same order. And you could do both of these, of course, for different questions. You might consider not letting them see their quiz responses so that they don't get to see how well they don't get to see the correct answers. They'll still see how well they did overall, and use a time limit. And so one way to implement this is, if you have a class, you could make the quiz accessible right at the beginning of a class period when you'd be assigning some kind of quiz, and have them take it during the first half, and then use the second half to review the quiz. And you'd want to do this probably because if they're not getting the feedback, it's not clear exactly how useful this can be for them. Okay, if you want some more resources on Canvas quizzes, here's some videos. So if you click on this one and search quizzes with your browser, you can find them. There's that OIT video I had, and here's a big Canvas guide. Okay, that's all I have on this. And then we'll talk about more Canvas resources later after that. But does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any built-in way to have students do group quizzes using Canvas? I can think of lower tech ways, just being go into his Zoom chat and then work on the quiz together. Yeah. But I didn't know if you knew about any functionality.
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll look into that though. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And once again, I just want to kind of emphasize, those are just some things that you can use. Ultimately, you should be thinking about this, and you can use some of those functions if you want.
Yeah, one thing that we'll also cover in one of the workshops tomorrow is how you can embed quizzes in videos, which is kind of cool. So if you want to assign videos for your students to watch, and you want to, check that they watch the videos, there's the software that lets you basically, embed quizzes into the video. So for example, like if you have a 10-minute video, you could embed a quiz at 4 minutes, 8 minutes, and at the end, and the student is kind of forced to watch all the way through and take the quiz at the points where you inserted it. And then this also gets recorded in the Canvas gradebook. So that's kind of a neat thing. And this is a software that's called Play Pause It. That's an add-on to Canvas, and we'll talk tomorrow about how to do that. So that's another way to do a quiz thing. Again, I'm not sure there's a group function. I don't think so, but that's something to kind of play with. So okay, so then any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Right after we switched over to online last semester, there was a thread in the philosophy department where people could just ask questions, and other students, grad students and faculty would answer what they do in that situation. And then it seemed to sort of peter out, or maybe I just changed my settings somehow. But is there something like that still going on? And if not, will that be available? Because that was helpful to me.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I think we'll still keep that listserv. I don't think it's, actually deactivated, but people just probably haven't been using it as much. One thing also is if people are interested in certain things, it's really good to just kind of form maybe a working group where you can, have a small community to work on all these things. But I hope that we do keep all of this stuff going during next semester.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, Zach, you're also going to talk about how to book consultations and stuff, right? So if you want sort of some real, it's not like a quick thing, you really want to learn some new technology, you can actually just, book somebody to actually just teach it to you one-on-one or in a small group. But I think Zach is going to get to that, right?
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit after your next section.
Okay, so then maybe I'll go to my last little thing here. Okay, so this is kind of a little feature in Canvas that I want to highlight because I like it a lot. It's called Name Coach. As we said, the problem with online teaching is that sometimes it can feel a little bit impersonal, and the students might feel like you don't really connect to them as much as you could when you're teaching in person. And one thing you can do that's pretty simple is to learn how to say their name correctly. Of course, if you're teaching on Zoom, you can see their name displayed on the screen, but if somebody has a somewhat unusual name, that might still not help you know how to pronounce it correctly. And so now what Canvas has is this little feature that's called Name Coach, where students can just record the pronunciation of their name. And it should be enabled by default on Canvas, but if it's not, you can just go to the settings and then go to the navigations and then check if it's on the list of features that is visible to students in their navigation bar. And if it's not there, you just move it to the desired position and you save it. And then one thing you could ask the students to do in the first week is to record their name with Name Coach. So here's just a little screenshot of how that would look, right? So it's here on the left in this navigation bar. It would show up just like the other things like assignments and so on. And then the student would see a screen like this, and you basically just press a button, you say your name, you can listen to it and check if the recording came out well. You can repeat it if you don't like it. And so if each of your students does that, you could go through and listen to them and make sure that you know how to say everybody's names. And that way, when you interact with them on Zoom, you can make sure that you're addressing them correctly. So yeah, that's very simple. And it's just, again, an idea to make things a little bit more personalized. So yeah, and so if we have a little bit more time for questions, or we can also go over to Zach on support and tutorials. All right, do you want to finish it off, Zach?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Okay. So here are the resources for Canvas quizzes, but Canvas has a lot of cool resources. So this is a big guide for lots of things, and it includes video guides for instructors and written guides as well. And you can kind of search for whatever you're looking for there, and they usually have something. CU has put out some videos on Canvas and remote teaching in general. So they talk about how to set up your grade book. They give you a nice broad overview in the beginning. So there's different videos, and you can check that out here. One thing to really note there is that if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see that you can request group trainings or even individual consultations. And so these are with the Learning Tech, oh shoot, I forget the exact name, right? Learning Tech Consultants, I think. And you know, it's their job to teach us how to do these things. So if you have a few people that are interested in a certain technology or something, then you can schedule a group one. If you just have an individual consultation, you want to talk with somebody about something, you can schedule it there. It's entirely free for you to do. So strongly recommend doing that. So here's like some websites you can use. I don't include it here, but you can also pretty easily find things just by Googling them. So Google whatever you're trying to do in Canvas, and usually you can find something pretty quickly. But you can also get support through your Canvas page. So here's a screenshot of how you do that. Notice that down here in your like very far left navigation column, you have this help button. And here's those Canvas guides that I pointed you to. They're pretty cool and neat. Here's another place where you can request a consultation with one of CU's learning technology consultants. So you can just do that straight from Canvas if you want. There's also this training services portal that you can log into. And so that's something you can check out. And lastly, you can do this chat with Canvas support. Make sure you choose the one for faculty since you are faculty. But you know, you might want to note that students can do this too. And you know, when you do that, you get different options of the immediacy and what you want. I've used this a lot. Sometimes with a lot of benefit where they've really helped me. Sometimes just to be told, nope, Canvas doesn't do that. And I can remember one occasion when they told me something that was wrong. So, you know, results may vary, but this is something that you can do. And I've done this before. You might consider doing it. All right, that's all that I have.
So I just looked into the question that Ted asked earlier about group quizzes. And from what I could just find kind of quickly is that you can't have quizzes be taken by a group, but there's a separate thing, which is assignments, and assignments can actually be assigned to groups. And it actually works with kind of similar like the group discussion boards where you create the different group sets where you have, you know, you say, oh, I'm creating a, you know, a set of groups for, you know, this assignment. And then you would assign the, you know, the assignment to those groups, and then each group submits one assignment. You could play with what that interface looks like for them, but it looks like you can do it. It's just not a quiz. You have to set it up as an assignment, but you know, you could just like, you know, write out the questions as the assignment, and then your group submits that. So that, I guess that would be the path to do it.
Very cool.
All right, so yeah, we have 10 more minutes for questions. So if people want to ask questions, that's great. Or otherwise, we could also give people their well-deserved break, and then we'll have the next workshop at 11:30, and that's going to be all about teaching with Zoom and teaching with Zoom synchronously. So having live classes with Zoom. Okay, so then maybe we should just give everybody a break, and yeah, you can just mute yourself and your video if you want, or you can log back in later, either way. But yeah, we'll continue here at 11:30 then. Thank you.
Zach and Julia, thank you so much. This is really awesome. I mean, you've just, you know, researched all this, and it's really great. So really, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Oh, thank you.
Okay, see you at 11:30 then.
Yep.